Okay guys, today I'm going to cover Ret Reckoning, kind of getting back to my roots. Probably my favorite build overall. I call it the Vanguard spec because it kind of plays like a warrior. You don't have mortal strikes, so you're not as I mean that's the big thing that really makes you not as good as a warrior in a pre-made, in my opinion. I mean there's some other aspects like charge helps you close distance, and if a paladin's giving you freedom, then um, yeah, it's pretty. I mean, it's an amazing thing to be a Vanguard unit and really just get out there immediately. That being said, some of the nice things about Ret Reckoning is it's kind of like 3-for-1 build because you could do some pretty nasty one-handed itemization builds that are incredible for dueling certain classes. You can go physical damage and do some pretty nice burst damage against casters, especially in real PvP. If you're getting support from a healer. And then you can also do like spell reckoning and destroy some heavily armored guys. Like you could have the same exact spec. So let's say you're fighting on defense and you need to kill like a mage. You could swap out to physical gear, and then in the same BG, let's say the enemy, I guess flag carrier is a druid. You could literally just swap to spell damage reckoning and hit them pretty hard. So I really like that. It's like you can play this spec and get away with PvPing in a lot of different ways. If your server doesn't consider pre-charging an exploit, then I would say Ret Reckoning is extremely powerful in world PvP. Even without that, it's a pretty good dueling spec. I mean, even if you could even take your like all around non-situational PvP gear and do really well in duels. So, I mean, if you really want to too, you can take it to the next level and do like resist stacking and all sorts of other cheese, and then you become like god tier at dueling. Um, what to be said about it? Well, you obviously want a high delay weapon, as every time you get critted, you get an extra swing. And Ret Reckoning, it's oftentimes you'll pick up Stronghold Gauntlets and like deflection. So for parry haste, you're gonna want a high delay weapon for that too, since everything you do is based on your autos and PPM. Um, the PvP gear is pretty good for this, but you can definitely use really any set of gear as long as you make synergy around it. Like tier 2 could be pretty good for spell reckoning. Tier 1 is pretty good actually for kind of like a tankier DPS build. I would go like physical damage rings with tier 1. And that sounds kind of weird. Um, Also, tier 1's good for mixing for sword and board specs. Uh, the AQ40 gear is like amazing god tier. And I honestly think if you, based on my experience on the PTR server, I feel like Ret Reckoning scales really, really hard. Because what happens is like all these casters get a lot of spell damage around Blackwing Lair, and that's rough for you to deal with. But I mean, they get more spell damage, don't get me wrong, but I see a lot more crit chance come out later, it feels like. It just feels like I get critted a whole lot. And crits really aren't super good against paladins compared to like flat damage, because what happens is you get the eye for an eye proc back at them, and you get a ret counter for every time you get crit. And that skill is really insanely hard by the time you get like hand to rag. But if you get like I mean, if you ever get the in-game weapon Might of Menethil, it's kind of like GG. Like only tier 3 warlocks I felt like had a really good chance at beating you, and I don't think they can beat you if you do resist stacking on top of that. But that being said, I feel like there's different phases in the game where definitely you can lose duels, especially the LE Shaman and Mage. Blackwing layer time is a difficult period. So I guess I need to address itemization. So a lot of times I like to take strength over stam or agility or something when I'm going like deep ret, because the idea is you have more HP than you see. Like you get low on HP, you repentance, you heal yourself. Get low on HP, stun, heal yourself. But since you only have one CC, that's almost always going to be trinket out of, and you're trying to get counters. Like every time you get crit, you're like doing damage back with either a ret counter or eye for an eye, and you're like trying to just go ham and take all the bursts and soak everything up. I feel like stamina is by and large the best stat for Ret Reckoning. Oftentimes you won't even get like, especially against a caster, uh, you won't get any chance to heal. Basically, you're just running at them like a maniac, and like you're just trying to hit them really, really hard to the point where they freak out and try to reset the fight or just die. So that being said, I think one of your biggest weaknesses. Well, let's keep going with itemization first. So I would put the highest priority on stamina, and then I would definitely go strength. And agility is not as good as it is for retribution. Retribution, you really want to dodge hits. Once again, you can't get the counters if you're dodging all the hits, but you still want to dodge. That's not the main reason. The main problem, agility is a little better. I would maybe not better than strength, but in comparison to how it works with Ret Reckoning is that like you only get 1 point in Vengeance, which is 3% more damage from your Vengeance procs. So you're not really trying to get damage by getting your Vengeance up, unlike classical Deep Ret. So really, agility is pretty low on the totem pole. Also, pretty low on the totem pole is it's not super low, but it's not as high as other builds. Spell power, and the reason for that is a lot more of your damage is white damage as Ret Reckoning. Unless you're doing spell reckoning specifically in which you use Seal of Righteousness. But hear me out on this. So what happens is you don't have Vengeance to scale with your like judgments, and you don't have 2 forms of CC to get the double damage judgment procs, and what you're doing for damage really is a whole bunch of white hits with maybe 1 seal command proc. You can't get multiple seal command procs on one Wreck Bomb unless, sort of, I mean, you can instantaneously judge your target and seal command. Well, like a Hand of Justice can proc off. Well, there's some weird stuff that can happen, but basically, you can only get 1 seal command proc off a Wreck Bomb. Okay, another stat that loses some value is intellect, because you won't really, if you're playing it like a Vanguard, you really won't have that much time to heal. Like oftentimes, as a lot of deep ret builds, I suggest this kind of like pseudo role where you're healing other people till you're low on mana, and then you're just tasking like rank 1 seal command and you're assisting the main warrior. With Ret Reckoning, that really shouldn't be what that's, you might have to cross heal every now and then, but that's not what you're there to do. It's not like you're optimal. You're there to get in people's faces and fight. So intellect's not worth very much either, really. I'm trying to think what else big differences are there. I guess that's it. I mean, I guess the main thing is stamina becomes really important, having a big HP pool, and then agility, spell power, and int, kind of not as they kind of go pretty far down on the totem pole. And strength's pretty high up there though. I mean, here's the thing: if you can do enough damage in one wreck bomb, in a way that kind of super like what's that word? Circumvents whatever the enemy's mana pool is, and whatever like if you wreck bomb someone, they live with 10% health, and then you get blinded or something, and then they bandage. So if you could have done 10% more damage, it's almost like doing triple damage because you just ended the fight before all the multiple chances for them to get healed. It's this weird thing where your wreck bomb is almost enough to one shot a whole lot of people. So if you can get it high enough, then the fight will end right then and there. So that's why it works really well. And then like any reckoning build in general, another stat we need to talk about real quick is procs. Procs good in general. So that's why even the Lawbringer doesn't work with the whole one-shotting. It still works pretty good in general because you'll have a two-hander, high delay, good PPM, high proc chance, plus multiple attacks with Reckoning. So I guess I'll cover a weakness with Ret Reckoning in general is you don't have like Holy Shock or Repentance. So it can be pretty difficult to close the gap on like a hunter, an ice mage in world PvP, especially. You really don't have a gap closer, and this is where you really have to consider engineering things you can do. I really like to use discombobulator rays, unlike grenades, because there's so many orcs that just like resist it. I know it kind of confuses me because I thought it was a disorient, but orcs seem to resist grenades all the time, so it must be a stun, huh? Anyways, I like the discombobulator rays, because there's a less chance they'll just randomly fail. And then, I mean, I know it's scrubby of me, but you can't miss with the discombobulator ray. It can be resisted, but you can't miss. But it's nature. I think it's nature. So it's really nobody has that much nature resist right now, anyways. Yeah, if you don't know what a discombobulator ray is, Google it. It's amazing for Ret Reckoning paladins. Now I know Holy Shock isn't exactly a gap closer, but why I said Holy Shock earlier is because it's something that can stop your enemy from eating food. So a lot of what is going to happen in 1v1 situations especially is the enemy will start losing and they will CC you and they'll run off and then they'll sit down and start eating and drinking trying to while you're stuck in some sort of CC. So if you have Holy Shock in other builds, you can like in that so they can't get the drinks and maybe they're bandaging or whatever. Or you're pretty vulnerable to resets with Ret Reckoning in general. Another thing that's pretty unique to Ret Reckoning, I mean, really all Reckoning builds like this and without repentance and stuff. Since you are weak to resets, poisons are really strong. Or like burn effects, like the Knickers damage over time ticks. You don't have anything that you have to worry about breaking. Like you don't have any CC like a repentance that it can break. So handed rag, the burn effect, really strong. Angora poison, really strong. Yeah, it's not totally unique to just Ret Reckoning, but it is worth mentioning. I think the coolest thing about Ret Reckoning is that like most classes get weaker when they get double teamed. I swear to God, like Ret Reckoning just gets more powerful because you're weak to CC and it's harder to CC someone who's being hit by multiple targets. So with lay on hands combined there, it gets ungodly powerful. Anyways, guys, day is full and good luck.